Good morning. It is Advent. That's exciting. I've seen several people smile and get excited about the start of a new season today. And I know here in Advent we have, of course, the Advent candle. We have Advent hymns. We have the Advent colors. I'm curious if anyone has ever heard of Advent math. Okay. I was doing some of that this week, and it goes a little something like this. The 10:30 service, we average, give or take, about 125 people a service. And if I estimate the average age of those attending, it's a very youthful, 60 years old-ish. So Advent math tells me that in this room, there is 7,500 years of Advent experience. It's pretty cool to think about. So that means we've experienced the beginning, the very first Sunday of Advent collectively, about 7,500 times, taken part in the change of the liturgical season, the hanging of the greens and the lighting of the candle, about 7,500 times. And let's not actually say out loud the number of Advent sermons y'all have heard. But as I reflect on that, I wonder how this Advent will be different. Should it be different? We'll come back to that. I remember the first house I bought in Lee Summit. It was pretty close to the train tracks downtown, and whenever I heard the train coming, I'd stop and just kind of listen, smile to myself. Cool to be in my own home. Imagine that train loaded with furniture or supplies, building supplies, cars, on its way to where those things were needed. And I would enjoy the sound of the wheels clacking on the track. And I can remember especially there was a day when those big wind turbine arms came through, and they had one arm on two flatbeds motoring through downtown Lee Summit. I thought, wow, how things change. But just as often it wasn't a freight train. It might have been an Amtrak train, bringing people, visitors, businessmen, friends and relatives, moving people in and through Lee Summit. And I lived in that house for about 12 years. After a while, I got used to the train. It became less of a wonder and more of a subtle and sometimes probably even unconscious notation in my head that there was a noise, a sound in the neighborhood that was just part of my environment. While I was aware of it, it didn't make me stop and wonder. It didn't make me change my activities or think about myself or where I was going. But you probably know where I'm headed with all this, don't you? 7,500 Advent seasons under our belt. Let's ask the question again, how will this one be different? How will we hear it and see it differently? You all remember that definition of insanity that was so popular for a while? The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect different results. Let's be different. Let's do some things differently. When we look at Isaiah, those first 3 verses are a cry from Isaiah on behalf of the Israelites. Post-exile, they are searching for that mighty and powerful God who's historically shown up, and shown up in a way that it rains fire, shakes the mountains, frightens enemies, and even, as Isaiah notes, in actions that go beyond expectation. So that God showed up in mighty ways equally inspirational and terrible, and the people were waiting, looking for that new beginning, for that power to tear open the heavens and come down. Because if anybody needs a new beginning, the post-exilic Israelites do. But oddly, God is not showing up. God is allowing the struggle and the wrestling of the Israelites. And they indeed wrestle their worst selves. And they lose. When God hides from them, they lose their ability to do right. They lost how to remember God in their actions, and they forgot to call on God, to reach for God. And they're fading like leaves. And their iniquities take them further and further from God. And I think to myself, it's the same for us. We struggle too. We seek God's quick and decisive deliverance against the things that are beyond our comprehension, beyond our control and our understanding. And we take inventory of the things in our modern world that cause unbearable suffering. Poverty, corruption, a relentless and violent pursuit of power and wealth. You name the thing, we question why God doesn't show up, why God's mighty power doesn't come. We might also wonder in our own quiet desperation why God doesn't deliver me or us. We too wrestle with our own worst selves and find ourselves further and further from God. But what is notable here is that after Isaiah poignantly confesses the sin of the Israelites, he doesn't stop. He then speaks to a change in the people's relationship with God. He reminds them that they are clay, to be formed by the hands of God. And he also reminds us that we are God's people. Isaiah also reminds God that we are the work of God's hand. And this is a shift, a transformation in God's relationship with God's people, seeking us to be in anticipation and to prepare for the forming of the potter's hand. So this is our fresh look at Advent. A look with hope, a look with anticipation, and preparation for the holy and intimate relationship that God calls us into. And so if this Advent is different, then we too must be different. What will you dare to hope for in this Advent, in this new beginning? And how will living into the anticipation, even the expectancy of that hope, how will that change you? How will God use that to form you? And as we all hope and anticipate, how will that change our preparation for the coming of the Christ child? Gracious God, may our hearts be as clay and formed by your hands during this season and every season until your kingdom comes.